And three, two, one. All right, and welcome back to the Educators Podcast. I'm your host, Alejandro Gutierrez. And as usual, I have a special guest here. We're going to talk some education, get into the classroom, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Go ahead, my man, introduce yourself. Who are you? Where you from?
All right. My name is Jaime Avila. I am a Latino educator here in the Bay Area, San Jose specifically. Actually, I'm a Bay Area native, born and raised, youngest of 8 kids. And I've been in the education game going on 15 years now. So
Wow.
it's great to be on the show. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
No,
it.
man, and I appreciate you jumping on here. I think we've connected through other people, and like I said, through social media. We have a mutual friend, and I don't know, you've been able to help me a couple times. So I was like, man, I got to get him on because I started this podcast because of what you do, because of what I do, just teachers. And I wanted to do this whole thing where I'm like, I'm going to highlight teachers and what they do outside the classroom as well, because I don't know about you, but I've met so many teachers that do so many things outside the room as well. Just as like, I don't know, they can have a second profession or a hobby and I was just thinking of that during the pandemic. And then I don't know, we stumbled across each other on social media, and I'm glad we did. So hopefully we can talk a little bit about the classroom and why you got into it. So we can start off with that, Jaime. I appreciate your time, and kind of tell me, everybody has a why, and that's what I ask everybody. So why teach, man? You could do anything in the world. Why teach?
Man, it's a long story, and like it's a story of hundreds, if not thousands of voices that contributed to me being here. And if I could pinpoint it, I think that decision was made in high school. So, like I mentioned, I'm the youngest of 8, and I just happened to end up in these classrooms with two amazing educators, Jean Dorsa and Brian Barrientos. And at the time, I was not on a college track. We're first generation. And, while education was important to my family at the time, it was more of a, graduate high school.
Right.
And the college path wasn't really, laid out in front of us, like what it was about and how do you navigate it? More importantly, how do you navigate it? And, these two educators, I wasn't the strongest student when I entered their classrooms, but for whatever reason, they saw potential and they worked with me. And eventually they started asking me the questions, what are you doing after high school? And at the time, I honestly didn't have an answer. It was just like, well, I'm going to go to work. It's kind of what you do, right? And so, they started asking me like, well, have you ever thought about college? And to me, it was such a foreign concept. I had heard of it. I had heard some friends talk about it, but it wasn't really on my radar at the time. And so it started off with Jean Dorsa and then continued on with Brian Barrientos, both of them science teachers, one physiology and the other one physics. Like I never envisioned myself taking physics.
Right.
And so they just gradually started talking to me about like, okay, well, this is what you need to do. Like, do X, Y, and Z. What classes are you taking? And, I'm sure the counselors at my school were, doing what they were supposed to be doing, but that message came crystal clear through those two educators that I needed to go, that I had the potential to go and the potential to do something. And that really stuck with me. And so, I end up having, a really strong junior year, a really strong senior year. And, I have this opportunity to, pick between a couple of schools. And, for me, my family was and still is pretty much local. And so San Jose State, which is our local CSU, was just kind of like the obvious choice. I wasn't, there were some offers from like Colorado, and I was like, I don't know anything about Colorado. So, I'm gonna stick close to home. And so, I don't regret that decision. Just some amazing experiences over at San Jose State. And, it just so happens that, things just line up, like the universe lines things up for you sometimes. And, I think that decision to go to San Jose State, some people that I encountered there, it just, along with my past experience with those two educators, just kind of navigated me and pushed me into education. And so, when I was there, love science, absolutely love science. And so tutored a couple friends and then, tutored some people in classes. And then that's when I realized like I loved talking about science. I love breaking down science because, I tell my kids all the time, science seems very complicated, and it can be complicated, but if you break it down into simple pieces and then just build on those pieces, it's really not that bad. And so that just became a passion of mine, is breaking down these complex pieces into simpler parts. And originally was just a bio major and was going to enter in the field of science. And I was, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, like, I really love interacting with people and talking about science. And so I think it was my second year that I became fully committed, like, okay, I'm going to go into education. And from then it was just a straight shot into education.
And that's cool, man. You kind of you already broke it down for me. Your whole path, and I'm glad that you kind of found that success with, like you said, you were tutoring someone, and it could be that little experience that you had with someone else. It could be a peer or someone younger, and you see that success, like, oh, I could break down this concept for this person, and I think I could relate with that when I started coaching soccer, as like soccer is this complex sport, right? And so me being able to break it down to 4-year-olds, 5-year-old, different age groups, even high school, I kind of saw this thing like, oh, I think I could see myself in the classroom. My path's a little bit different, just because my parents were educators. Mm-hmm. So it was something that I was like, well, I could be a teacher like you. And I remember mom always saying, like, no, you don't want to do that. Like, do something else. And it wasn't that she was trying to knock the profession. I think it was just like, try to do something else first. And, because of that, I was able to, I don't know, kind of steer my way around different careers until I ended up teaching. I think I always saw myself as a teacher. But going back to your story, Jaime, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. How about your home life? Was education a big thing at home? Was that something that your parents kind of instilled in your siblings, or what can you talk about?
My parents, came from Mexico, and it's a classic story. They came to the U.S. looking for a better life for their kids, and for the most part, it was just, look, we're here, we can have better jobs. Right. It really, the kind of push was high school, and it's not because that was like their ambition for us, like, okay, just high school. It was just, that's all that was known. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, because I'm the AVID coordinator here at my school. It's with some families, it's not that they don't want to go to college or they don't have that aspiration. It's nobody talks to them about it. It's not part of the conversation. And I think it's important to have those conversations with kids, because it wasn't something that was talked about in my family. And there's reasons for that. It's like, it's fine that it wasn't, because eventually, I was able to get there. I was, I said I was lucky enough that my family was supportive and said, like, yeah, go do this thing that we know nothing about.
Right.
And I look at it and it's like, it's a shame that, like I said, these barriers still exist. They existed when I was growing up. It's like, they don't deliver this info to these families. It doesn't get to them. And so, once I graduated, like I said, I was very passionate about that, about like, okay, well, these first generation families who, like I said, it's just not part of their conversation. Let's bring them in. Let's invite them to the table. And that's what it was. I mean, I think, growing up, it was one of those ones where the table was there. We just weren't invited to it. And so that's why I became very passionate about that as well. But now it's different. So now, once, now that I navigated the system, it's helped my nieces and nephews navigate that system. And so now it's part of the constant conversation in our household. It just is. And again, we had to bring that, we had to bring that conversation in. And so now, through programs like AVID, I'm trying to do the same with other families.
Yeah, you're trying to normalize the college experience, because I think for a lot of, it could be with anything we're talking about. It could be any path. Some families are just, for some kids and some families, it's just normal to do this. It might be normal to have a convertible and go on golf trips and go on snowboarding trips. Yeah, right? That's normal to a family, or to some other families. It's normal to not go anywhere, right? It's normal to go to the, whatever it may be. And I see it, right? And I think it kind of hit me when I started coaching at this high school nearby where I grew up. And I remember telling the students, it was like a Thursday, and I'm like, hey, so Saturday we're gonna play this tournament game. It's gonna be over here at this school, right? And we're talking about the neighboring school, Jaime, right? The school that's
Yeah.
2 miles down. And the kid was like, "Where's that at?" And I kind of was like, thought he was playing, and I was like, hey, he's a sophomore. There's no way he's playing with me. Like, there's no way he's lying. There's
He's
no way
joking.
he's like joking about that. And he's like, and the conversation I'm having with him, he's like, "No, really, where is that at?" So I'm trying to give him references, like, "Do you know where the Walmart is?" And he's like, "There's a Walmart?" And I'm like, "Okay, right." And so I'm starting to break this down to the point where I'm like, wow. And I didn't realize this kid was 14, 15 and had never left his street,
Yeah, you hang
And
around your hood.
right, he was just hanging out, and it wasn't because maybe, I don't know, his resource or whatever it may be, but it's definitely just, like we said, normalizing college is something that we're trying to do for our families, but it wasn't maybe for the families before us. So it's
Yeah.
the same thing. I kind of just analyze. I mean, I'm just trying to like compare that with something, and I think I was like, wow, this student has never left their house. I'm hoping that now this student is able to drive himself around, and maybe when he has his family, he could take them more places. But it's just not normal. So at my house, I was lucky enough to have college as a normal conversation, just because like I said, my parents were educators, and they always, it wasn't about like, hey, are you going to college? It was like, which college are you going to?
Yeah.
Or what are you going to do when you actually finish college? So that was kind of like, I was lucky enough to have that conversation. I'm glad that you're able to transmit that back to your nephews and your next generation, especially the students you have in your room, because that's what our job is to become that resource for the next group.
Yeah. And it leads to like a larger conversation on privilege. It's like I think when some people use that word, they assume like, well, things are handed to you. It's not necessarily that things are handed to you. It's just that you have the privilege of being around these conversations that are just normalized for you. Like these doors are just there for you, where other people don't have that level of access, and no one's going to them giving them that level of access either.
No.
You, like I said, you're privileged because you get to hold that info within, your family or your circle of people. It doesn't leave you. And so I think, especially like a lot of stuff that happened over, this past summer, with discussions of privilege, it made me rethink about that, about what that really means. It doesn't mean that you're, like I said, you're necessarily handed things, although it can be, but it's just, like I said, you just have so much more access to
Right.
things that others don't. And it, like, some people just don't realize it. And I think that that's what, some people like myself looking back, it's like, you don't understand. Like, I never had that. Like you do. Like it was just part of your conversation.
Correct.
And you don't realize it. You feel like, no, I don't have privilege. Of course you do. You just, the worst part is you don't realize it. Doesn't say it was so normalized for you. You don't realize that was the privilege,
Right.
that it was normalized for you.
And it is used in a negative connotation, like, oh, you're privileged, and it's used as a kind of like it could be kind of an insult or whatever it may be, but it's just, there's no other word, I guess, that you could use to say, like, I use normalized, right? Like things are normal.
Yeah.
Because, and I kind of, you've read that in books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? You read those things, those conversations where like, and you can kind of look back to different things where like, okay, that's just normal for them. Like it's not their fault either. Like that child grew up in Los Gatos, right? In this, it's not their fault, So when they go to do these things, you're like, that's not, that is privileged. But then again, it's not their fault either, because that's what their family had them set up for. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find that common ground, or some kind of trying to balance it out a little more. I don't know if you remember, but there was a teacher in Oakland, I believe, and he wrote an open letter to Stephen Curry. I don't know if you remember. He wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wrote the letter to Steph Curry and was like, "Please don't, like, when you come to my school, please don't tell my students that they can be you." And I was like, and this was like at least maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I think, maybe more, when he was, no, I think 5 years ago, when the Warriors were on, they were on fire. And,
they were on their tear.
I'm a Kings fan, so I don't mind the Warriors not doing well anymore. But the Warriors were on fire for a while, and it was a big thing, right? Steph Curry was the the hottest thing on the planet. And when the teacher wrote that, I had to read that article. I was like, let me read this. I read the letter, and he just tells Steph Curry, like, look, you can't tell my kids, like, you can tell my kids anything, but don't come to my school and tell them that they could be you, because your father was an NBA All-Star. You know what I mean? And so you're normal, like you standing there and watching. This goes back to what we're talking about right now. You watching these guys warm up, before games, and you're like hanging out with Vince Carter and different people as a kid. Um, that's not normal to these students, right? You
Yeah.
didn't. Well, pretty much, he was kind of a shot at him too. It's like your path was not a normal path, you know, and a
Yeah.
lot maybe his dad was, but his wasn't, you know, where it's like, you know, you're talking about, you know, these his dad was an NBA All Star, you know, and he can make phone calls to get him where he needs him to be, and that's normal to Steph Curry, right? So obviously he did take advantage of it. Not like everyone gets that opportunity, but he took advantage of it, and I think we're just talking about the same thing. So for you and I, you know, maybe it was normal to have a family, you know, because I think Latinos, you know, Latinx kids for the most part are able to have this family, this sense of family and this sense of close knit, you know, like hanging out for religious ceremonies, or we have traditions that we just keep, you know, and it's very important for us to hang out with our cousins. It's just a thing that we do,
Yeah.
right? And I think for other people, it's not normal, you know. So we have our advantages too, and other people have their thing, you know.
Yeah, and but part of the reason I bring that, because I know we're going to talk some education and distance learning, is, you know, I think it's also important for educators to recognize some of this as well,
Mhm.
because in distance learning, again, when we talk about things like privilege and things that are normalized, you're right. For some of them, it's not their fault, but I think it's important for educators to recognize that they have it, because in some cases, especially during distance learning, there are some students who have advantages in technologies, in their network abilities, and for teachers to turn around and say, well, all students need to be like that. It's like, well, no, like, you as an educator need to recognize not everyone is
Correct.
like that.
Correct.
That's not the normal for everyone. And if it's not the normal for everyone, you can't hold everyone to that exact standard. It doesn't mean you have low standards for your kids, don't get me wrong, but you also have to recognize not all kids have that equipment, or have that
Name
network
access.
ability,
Right.
or that access. Yeah. And so I think that's another kind of important thing that, like I said, when I talk about privilege, like, educators need to learn to recognize it.
And that's something that I've seen. It hurts me because I hear some people that that are grown now, and they'll tell you like, "Oh, I hated school," and I'm like, "Really? Like I loved school." You know what I mean? So I loved going to high school. Like I loved my high school. You know, I
Yeah,
had I mean, yeah, there were some things I didn't like to do, but for the most part, I look back, I'm like, that was a great time. You know, and I think I was able to connect with other students and have a good time with it. I think the disconnect probably would have been with teachers, but just because there were so many students, the teachers didn't seem to, you know, make very many connections with all of us. There was a lot of us, so it was a big school. But I look back, so I look forward now, and I'm looking forward into what we're doing now, is you know, talking about this distance learning, and you know, we got caught, right? We got caught as an educational system, as a country, as
yeah,
a world, the world, period. But I think just if we want to focus smaller, we could just talk about our state or whatever it may be. But we got caught unprepared, right? We got caught unprepared. I mean,
for
I
sure.
think some districts more than others, but I mean, fortunately, where I'm working, we were prepared enough. Technology was not a new thing to us, right? We had already been using the Google Suite. You know, we already had, Google Suite. We already had, Google Classroom and different things. That was already, you know, we've been using those for 5 years. We are a Google school, you know, Google district, and so we were able to have like, you know, we got kids have Chromebooks at school. We had one per student, you know, per classroom. So we had
uh,
plenty of technology ready. So it was just about getting it to them, you know. The biggest thing, and you could tell me about your experience, but the biggest thing that we had here was I didn't realize how many students didn't have internet, you
yeah,
know, and I was like, wow, you know, because I don't know for you, but for me, one of my main things on my checklist to have in my house is, you know, okay, it's like, you know, water, food, this and that, but internet is on my list. You know,
yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna have it, you know, and my wife and I, we always joke because, you know, she's from the Central Valley, right, Stockton area, Lodi, and so she wants to, you know, she wants to live out there in the ranch and have that area because she grew up like that.
Yeah.
And my whole thing is like, man, you know how slow the internet's gonna be if I live there, you know? And that's like, I always joke with people about that. I'm like, nah, man, I'm gonna stay in the city. I know it's more expensive. I know there's taxes, like, but that Comcast line is right in front of my house, you know. So that kind of stuff to me that's my priorities though. That's because that's how I entertain myself, you know, or that's how we do things. But students didn't have internet, and I was like, wow, that is crazy to think that in this first world country that we have, right, the greatest country in the world, quote unquote, or whatever, top five. I don't know how they rank these things, but we assume that everyone has internet. We assume that everybody has, and not just access to the internet, Jaime, but I also think, I mean, I know you could relate to this with other students you might have dealt with, but not everyone has a safe place to be at
Yeah.
um, outside of school, which is kind of weird, right? So when they're not at school, it's like they're probably sometimes uncomfortable. You know, they're more comfortable being at school. You know, so kind of tell me about that. What you thought going into that, and what you kind of, I don't know, dealt with. If you want to,
Yeah.
you
I
don't
mean,
have to share too much, but just a couple
when
things.
when COVID first happened, I think all of us thought, okay, we're gonna go 2-3 weeks.
Right, a year ago, we
Yeah,
said that a year
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah,
A year
yeah.
ago, we thought like, okay, well, give us 2 or 3 weeks. Nah, we'll catch them up once they get back. And then once we realized we weren't coming back, for us it was a couple of weeks when Newsom made the announcement that yeah, you're not going back. And I started thinking like we're gonna see both some positives in education and some definite negatives out of education, because and again it wasn't the school's fault, but we weren't prepared to make that like instant transition into distance learning. But I knew teachers would rally. Okay, for the most part teachers would rally for their kids, but it was going to highlight some things in education we need to work on. And don't get me wrong, even without distance learning, there are plenty of things that we need to work on, a lot of
Yeah,
things that we need to work on.
right.
But I think these magnified some of those things. And yeah, you're right. It started off with some of these kids don't have Chromebooks at home. We had them here at school, but again, you had a group of kids who already had laptops, who already had computers at home.
Yeah,
And then there was this other group that didn't. And then you have this group who has access to the internet, high speed internet. And then you have this other group that doesn't. And, even before we talk about like, okay, well, then we got them hotspots, we got them Chromebooks, if we rewind the clock back to when they were in school, this is why I say educators really need to think about this. We need to pay more attention to it. Before the pandemic, it's not like that was different. You had this group of students who had access to technology, who had access to high-speed internet, and you
mm-hmm.
had this other group that didn't. They didn't have a laptop at home, they didn't have a computer at home, or they didn't have great internet. And we're holding them to the exact same standard. And sometimes educators are using this group who have all that equipment and who have that great internet and saying, why can't you be more like them? And, for me, it's like, can you imagine being that other group hearing that? It's like, well, I can't. Like, it's just like, I literally can't. And I think this switch during COVID really highlighted that. Like, look, you have to understand, some of them just do not have it. Okay, we need to do a better job as an education system. Like, if we're going to compare those two groups, we need to make sure they're on a more level playing field.
Correct.
And again, that's one of those things that just like instantly popped out to me. Like, when we send these kids home with homework, like, how come you didn't do your homework? Or, how come you turned it in late? Well, like, right. Well, like, how much more did this group of students have to do? Like, how much more did they have to extend themselves than this group just to get a homework assignment done? And then you multiply that by every single day they're in school. And so for me, it just highlighted like, holy crap, like we need to do a much better job of paying attention to this. And that was just that, like, forget like home life too. Right now, while we're on Zoom, there's some of these kids who turn on their cameras and they're inside of, their own room or an office, because there's a kid who's in an office by themselves. Okay. They have, amazing headset, great
LED
mic,
lights, a gamer
LED,
chair.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and then you have this other group who's at the kitchen table and you can hear their brothers and sisters Zooming, for their middle school class or their elementary school class. And, this kid is trying to get their work done while they're, right next to their siblings. And again, we're asking this group to be just as good as this group, or at least that's the expectation. Like, we're expecting to turn it in at exactly the same time, have exactly, it's like, you have to recognize the inequity between these two groups.
Right.
And I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying that you have a lower standard, because I think that's what sometimes educators think, like when you talk like that, like, oh, well, you want us to lower standards. And like, no, you still have high standards for both, but you recognize,
understanding.
You recognize that they are at two different levels. no fault of either of them. Like, it's not their fault that they have all this tech, and it's not their fault that they don't. But
Right.
what are you as an educator going to do to sort of balance that out? And I think that's the hard part of being in education. You have to recognize that and balance that out, because the cop out is just like, well, I'm going to teach, I'm just going to teach. And those who can keep up, and those who can't. Like, that's not how I see it, in education.
No.
And so, yeah, it definitely got highlighted during the pandemic. And you're right. Like, and, there's this sort of this internal, dialogue and struggle that I'm having. Like, should we bring kids back? Should we not bring kids back? And, there are always going to be schools who brought them back way too early. And there's going to be schools who bring them back way too late. That's just kind of the way that it's going to be. But yeah, no, it got me thinking about, what about those kids where school is the best learning environment? Like, this is the best place for them to learn, because at home, whether it's too small or maybe the people they're living with. Can you imagine, like, coming to school is an escape from the people that you have to be around?
Correct.
I feel for those kids. So, like, there's this internal, dialogue in me, like, when should we bring them back? Because I'm trying to balance out, the safety of, staff and other family members too. So, that has been like one that's just been nagging at me the whole time. Yeah. So what about, like, for your group of kids, are you guys, how long have you guys been back? Or
so we went back, we're on spring break right now. When this episode drops, it will be, a couple weeks. We'll be our third week already in school with students, and it's a hybrid system. As far, it's just a hybrid system. There's 3 groups that come in. They rotate. It's ABC pretty much. So one day is A day, the next day is B, and it just keeps going that way. It keeps rotating ABC. So sometimes you go to school twice a week. Sometimes you go to school once a week, and then you're at home on Zoom at the same time if you're not in class. So it's a lot to ask from everyone. Especially, the staff, the teachers who have to navigate all these things. But like you said, we rally around, man. Teachers have definitely showed their true colors this year and been tested to the limits for right? Sure. I think, this my mom, I say it, and I don't say it as a knock to my mom. She's taught over 30 something years, but she was she was going to retire this school year. Mm-hmm. But since last school year, ended in the way it did, and she's a kindergarten teacher, it was like a, complete disaster as far as, like, giving kids technology. They didn't have that, right? Kindergartners, you never equate having Chromebooks for kindergarten. It's not a thing. Yeah. And she's from, she was at a school that's a really high socioeconomic level, but area, but it's just the way kindergarten is, right? And so having to make her learn what Google Classroom was and make videos, and it was a lot of work for myself and my wife. We were over there, like, we would do our lessons and then go to my mom's house, help her do hers, and it was a lot. And she ended up just saying, like, I can't go back for another school year like this. Like, especially it's going to be required. It was going to be required to do more, right, than it was at the end of last year. So she just said, I know I'll make more money, but I'm done. So I know a lot of teachers that ended up just saying, this is too much and I'm done. And I don't knock any of them, because, there's got to be a reason why you leave. So it was good. That was the writing was on the wall, and it was too much. But definitely we've been tested, and we've been able to fight through it. I think it's just what hurts us right now, what hurts myself as a teacher, is being able to make that connection with students. I became a teacher, like, just like you did, to connect with students and help them, right? And not even like in the subject that I teach, but just be there for them and steer them in a way, that's positive for them. And so if there's a camera off, I don't even know what some of these kids look like, and I don't. And
they just look like a name or an icon, right?
Yeah, it's just an icon, and it's not that I want to be a bully, like, turn your camera on. It's like, I want to let you know that I got you. What can we do for you? And if you're just, looking at a teacher talk on the camera, I just don't see that, and I really feel bad for the younger kids, the elementary school kids that are being robbed of their kindergarten experience, or their first grade experience, which is, if you can go back, those are the best times ever, right? Having a good time and playing. And so that's being robbed right now, and I'm kind of fortunate that my son is not of school age yet, so he didn't have to go through that. And so, but he is missing out on other things as well. But yeah, man, we're trying to get through this. It's been 3 weeks. I think by the time this comes out, we're gonna have all the kids back, so we're not gonna have any cohorts anymore. Mm-hmm. We're gonna have kids in and kids at home at the same time. So it'll be all the kids there. It'll be a lot of students in, probably 40 to 50% in the classroom, and then other percentage at home. So
Yeah, so for us, we're going to come back April 19th. That'll be the first time some of our kids are allowed back on campus. And yeah, I mean, it's been rough. I think the don't get me wrong, there are some things that are a little bit easier on Zoom. I mean, some people can roll out of bed, can, rock the button up with the sweats on bottom, and, it's less work that way. But I think overall, it's more work teaching on Zoom. I don't know if you feel the same way.
it's a
That
lot of work. It's a lot of work. I agree.
yeah, this is like it, and it's different. Like I said, you're right. Connecting with students is so much harder now during Zoom, and it doesn't mean that I don't connect with them. I still try. It's just it takes longer. It's harder. They're more quiet. You don't have those moments where you can just walk in the classroom, stop by a desk really quick, talk with them, and then just have that small conversation with them at their desk or just as they're coming in the door. It's different. And yeah, I know you got the breakout rooms, but it's just not the same.
No.
And this is basically just kept us afloat. That is the way I look at it. It just kept us afloat for about a year. That's really all distance learning did. Are there some kids that distance learning is going to work for? Yeah, I think there's a small subset of kids where distance learning works better for them. But I think for the most part, in my experience with my own students, it just works better in person. It just does. And so I can't wait. I can't wait to come back now that we're vaccinated. So now that teachers have gotten their, the opportunity to get their vaccine, I can't wait to be back in person with my students.
Yeah, because you're doing science, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, how are you doing labs? Or what kind of science do you teach, or what?
So, marine bio. So obviously, yeah, really difficult to do it. So, we're, and again, that's what I'm saying. It's so much harder to do it online because you're trying to pull these pieces. Okay. And again, it's something that just came up out of the blue. And to say like, oh, well, here's the answer. Like no one had the answer that instant. And even right now, there are these companies that are, trying to play catch up with digital labs. Like they're kind of making them as they go. And, we're kind of trying to follow along as best we, so, we're pulling from here and pulling from there. But for the most part, I try to get my kids to do on like hands-on stuff at home, because science isn't like, yes, science can be done in a laboratory, but, there's just, some very simple things that can be done at home. Like go explore the natural world at home. Get outside, go look at something outside for a little bit. And so, yeah, so as much as I can, I try to get them to do some of that hands-on stuff. But again, realizing like, okay, maybe these kids don't have the resources at home. So what else can we give them? So it's allowed me the opportunity to think about different options. So giving kids options and choices like, look, you could do this, but if you don't have it, then there's this opportunity, to do this instead. And it's something that I definitely see myself keeping when we come back, is offering students choice. Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to learn about this? Instead of me saying, this is how you will learn. And, I'll be honest, like it's something I used to do a lot of, and just over time have gradually let go. Like, I'm like, okay, I can't always force my way of thinking on students. Like I got to open it up to them. Like how do they want to learn? And I also have to accept the fact that they might fumble it because they might not know how they want to learn because they haven't explored that yet.
Right.
They're so used to somebody telling them like, no, this is how you will learn. This is it. But I do want to give them some options. And that doesn't mean like the whole year is like, do it however you want.
No, but
because
having that flexibility, to let them kind of choose.
Yeah, because my job as an educator, I go back to what I said earlier. It's taking the complex, what can be very complex, and breaking it down into simple pieces. So, I've had these years of education to synthesize all this stuff for them. But at the same time, like I said, I'm going to allow them to explore on their own. So it's kind of that balancing act between those two things that I'm definitely going to keep after distance learning is over.
Yeah, I could only imagine how difficult that was to do science, and I'm glad you learned something from that, so you can, because the education is going to evolve from this, right? I was thinking about it, like education will never be the same. I think the world, obviously, we know that the world will never be the same, and it's one of those things that you see restaurants. I've always go back to that one. That was the first change we saw. You know, the way restaurants kind of operated with like you scan your menu, you know, you have the QR codes and little things where you're like, why didn't you do that before? You know, that was already there. Why are you wasting paper and having me, you know, have these like fancy laminated things handed around or thrown
Yeah.
away? So now it's like, okay, that makes sense, right? The QR code and digital payments, and it's easier for accountability and them being able to, you know, check their money. So then I was like, education, how are we going to change? Well, you know, Zoom was something I was using a year before the pandemic. I was using Zoom to do college courses at Loyola Marymount. So I would do my Zoom every Wednesday with a couple colleagues. And then so when they said we're going to Zoom, I was like, okay, at least I know how to use it. So I had that advantage that like I knew what the app was, I knew what it could do, the breakout room, everything.
Uh,
And other teachers were still learning like what that was, how it meant, so or what it meant, and it's just kind of cool to see how education will evolve as far as like technology because, and I'm asking myself like, how come we weren't doing this before? You know, like
yeah.
let's be honest. A lot of things that we do as far as like printing, you know, let's say like books or textbooks or different things like that. It's like, man, you know, that's an old way of doing it. You know, especially like when the kids go to college, we're trying to prep them for this new world.
Mhm.
When they go to college, there's a lot of hybrid and online classes. You know, and when you and I went, probably you a little older than me, but when I you know
Yeah.
when I was going to at
I'm
the
a
end,
lot older.
no, just a little bit. On the you know on my way out of Sac State, and I went to Sac State. There was like one online class maybe offered during, you know, as far as undergrad. Junior college had a lot of online classes at the end, but like I remember under like Sac State, they really wanted you on campus taking the class with the professor. They weren't going to give you units just to do it. But now I'm pretty sure there's a lot more opportunities for that. But I remember taking like a I don't know, recreational therapy class like online, right? And it was like modules, right? So I learned how
Yeah.
to do the modules, and I feel like that's just going to be a continuous thing that's going to continue to evolve, and it's not a bad thing, you know. It also gives people an opportunity to teach from somewhere else, you know, have a teacher from across the world or students from all over the place, and so we'll see how this changes everything. I don't know about you, but I went back to the room this last 2 weeks, and I was like, you know what? I got to get rid of these computers, you know, like I got to get rid of because the students are so used to being in front of it and
Yeah.
just being nonverbal. And I'm a Spanish teacher, so we cannot be a nonverbal class. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You have
That's
to
just not gonna
speak.
work.
You have to communicate with me or with someone else. And we lost that with the Zoom, right? We lost the
Yeah.
opportunity to say, okay, you and you, okay, van a hablar dos minutos. You guys are going to communicate. You're going to ask each other these questions that we've been working on, or tell your story. And that's something that we're getting such a good hang of before we left. And it's like that's gone. Like
Yeah.
that is gone. Like now, this like I could ask a simple question like "Cómo estás?" and the kid looks at me like "What?" and I'm like, really? Like we were, you know. And so you lose that because when I was doing the Zooms and distance learning, my lessons were changed. My I was adjusting to the times, and I was like, all right, we can only do this, this, and this.
Yeah. Not the
You know,
same.
right? Students are not going to answer me if I ask them. I'll be waiting for Jaime to turn his mic on. He's going to take forever to turn his camera on. So let's just give him a flip grid, right? He could do the flip grid.
Yeah.
But there was a disconnect to having the kid even click the link to go to the flip grid. I'm like,
Yeah.
click on the link, and I'm in the flip grid waiting. I'm like, there's only 6 of you. There's only 4 of you, and so there was a lot of like, you know, and teachers probably had a problem like, okay, I don't have control of the class. I don't
Yeah.
have control of like, yeah, they're quiet, but I can't get them from point A to point B because they're not going there. Like, I don't know where they are. And so that was really hard for me. That was really hard for a lot of us. I hope that we can continue to use something like Flipgrid, you know, these cool digital tools that you could record yourself and, you know, you could play it back and have people hear you out. And it's actually really cool because then they have like recorded, you know, conversations that they can look back like on the first week and be like, wow, I got way better on week 9, you know, or way better on week 18. And so that's
that
something
reflection piece.
yeah, that's something that we could use as a reflection piece and a feedback thing with other, you know, a little checklist, and they're watching other students talk and they're waiting for key vocabulary to pop up in the story. So I kind of use that to our advantage, but I definitely see the importance of getting back in the room and giving them a pencil, man. Here's a pencil, here's a piece of paper, right? I need to see some movement because sometimes the computer, there's a lot of temptation as well as like,
Yeah.
my biggest thing is Google Translate, man. Google Translate.
It's
Oh
a bane of
man,
your-
Google Translate, anything Google. It's like it's cool that it's at your. And I tell the kids, I understand it's a temptation. It's there. You know, I
Yeah.
understand. If I was taking this French class and I had no idea, then I would resort to that. But I want you to not. I want you to struggle a little bit because you're not going to learn without struggling. And I think that's something that kind of hurt my students, but I think we're gonna get back there. I think we're gonna get to that point once I can get away from these computers for a bit, we'll be all right, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a question of like, what's education going to look like after this? It's my hope that we focus on the positives that I was talking about, and we learn from those negatives. And my biggest concern is that, we'll look back on this and be like, well, it's a 1-year thing, and we'll be right back to where we were before the pandemic. Because like I said, there's been problems in education, and we went through this, I mean, absolutely disruptive time. And if we take nothing from it, like I don't know what we're doing. If education takes nothing from this and just goes right back to where we used to be, where we know we had problems, what was the point? So, I'm hoping that we can take some of those positives that we learned and really focus in on them, and also focus in on those negatives, and try to fix some of the problems that we've been having. So, I'm already starting to think about like, yeah, what are the pieces that I'm going to keep? What are the pieces that have worked for my students? And so it's not just, pieces that have worked for me, but pieces that have worked for them. So I'm constantly asking them, like, what's working for you? Is this working? Is it not working? Because I always I'm like, look, I can be that person who's just like, look, you're going to do it because I say to do it.
Right.
And that's just the way it's going to be. But I would rather get their input on something and say like, look, I could do this if it's working for you. If it's working for you, then I'll work out the logistics. I'll figure it out along the way. But I think kids do, like, they would much rather do a flip grid than hop on Zoom and do something. Like they would just much rather do that.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing with Google Classroom. A lot of kids, I stay away from Google Classroom for a really long time. I mean, I have my master's in instructional technology, and I stayed away from Google Classroom. I'm still a proponent of pen or pencil to paper. There's a lot of research that shows that it's just better for your memory. It's just better that you can tie a concept to an action that you're doing.
Right.
But some of the kids are just better on Google Classroom. Like they'll turn it in on Google Classroom, but they won't turn it in. Like, there's just some things that were, I just struggling to get it from them on paper, but like on Google Classroom was just done, no problems. So yeah, like I said, I'm hoping to pull, like I said, the good things. And one of the things you mentioned was control. And it's one of those things that I had to let a lot of that go this year. And I'll be honest, I was scared, like, to let go of the little bubble that I'm always like trying to manage, like, trying to corral them the entire time. It's like, you can, I realize that for myself, I can loosen that up. I can let go a little bit of the control, my own ego, just let it go.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. Just open up the circle a little more. They'll be okay. And that's one of the other things that, like I said, I'm going to bring back with me. Like I don't have to worry about controlling that little bubble so tightly. And I think that's what freaked a lot of teachers out, is that, like I said, they were giving up control of the classroom. Like they had less control over their classroom. And so I don't know, for me, it was just a reflection question, like, okay, why do I feel like I need that control over these students? Like, why do I feel like I absolutely need to have it over them? And I get it. Like, I should watch them. I should pay attention to what they're doing. But like, just this, like I said, just this overwhelming sense, like, no, I need to control them. Like, no, I think I can get away from that. I think I'm okay getting away from that now.
Yeah. And that's something that I think education is going to evolve that way anyways, because I think we're just, I don't know, maybe we were trained that way. And obviously our administrators wanted that from us. Like, hey, we got to give them bell to bell instruction or whatever it may be. Like, we got to teach them every second that we can. And I think this has made us obviously take a step back and lose that classroom management. All right. So Jaime, kind of tell me, man, let me start over because my wife gets mad. I always say that. She always says I get mad. She gets mad when I say man. I always say man. So, all right. Jaime, could you kind of talk about if we were, you as an educator, if you were able to bring back or bring in different courses into our schools or different pathway, what would you, top of your head, what would you bring into the educational world today?
Well, me personally, and not just for myself, but from my students, as I was saying earlier, I'm always asking my kids, like, what do you want to learn? Not just in science, but just in general. Like, what do you want to learn about? What is school lacking? And that was a big conversation this year with my students. I kept asking, like, what are we missing? What don't we do? What don't we teach? What should we do? What should we teach? And one of the things that popped up was financial literacy. And I was mentioning earlier that I was watching an earlier, or not watching, listened to an earlier podcast where you were talking about stocks and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, I had to go out and learn that. I wish they would have taught me that in school about investing and investments and taxes and real estate. And, I love science and understanding about the natural world, how it works and how you play a role in that is very important. But so are taxes, because they're going to have to do that the moment they leave.
Yeah.
They're going to need to know how to file taxes. And, I go back to, if we circle all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, it's like, if these are conversations that are happening in the household, things about investment, real estate, business, taxes, then to that student or that person, it just seems normal. That's what they do. But there's this other set of people that they don't talk about it. And again, not because they don't want to, it's not part of their conversation. So I would love to bring that in to education, because the kids are curious about it. They're curious about financial literacy and like, okay, what do I do with my money? And I think, looking back on my own life, it was like, okay, I make money and then I spend money. It wasn't really like, okay, I really should be investing.
Right.
I really should be investing
Right.
This money. It doesn't mean I was living paycheck to paycheck, but yeah, if somebody would have told me like, look, if you start investing at this age, by the time you're this age, you could retire. Yeah. And now we're talking about it offline, where it's like, had I started investing 15 years ago, I could have the choice to stay in education. Like I won't have to. I could just be like, okay, now it's just a choice that I'm
Right.
staying here. And so a lot of kids are curious about that. One of the other things I would definitely bring back are, things like automotive, HVAC, home ec, and just cooking, just basic life skills.
Right.
That or wood shop. We're talking about my wood shop experience offline, how valuable that was.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I wish they could bring those things back. I mean, and we're talking about it. I understand the value of education and how college can be an investment, but that doesn't have to be the only path, especially if a student is interested and is gravitating towards something like, automotive or some other service industry. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with some of them make more than we do. Like, to be honest, an electrician, like I said, if you get an apprenticeship, you're gonna be making more than I do. You'll be fine.
Right.
But I think there's this negative stigma that like, if you don't go to college, you're not as educated, or you're not at this level. It's sort of like this new little like gold sticker that we put on people. Like, okay, if you go to college and you get this gold sticker, and if you don't get the gold sticker. And it's like, I try to tell my kids too, is like, a degree is a piece of paper. It's like, it's kind of like the percent in my class. It's like, it doesn't give you your value as a human being. Like, I always tell my students, I don't care if you have a 94 or a 4% in my class. Like, I'm going to treat you as a decent human being. Like, do I want you to have a higher grade? Absolutely. But I'm not going to treat you badly because of it. No. And I think sometimes, educators will equate, like I said, the percent to the person. Is like, you got to separate those two. So yeah, I mean, I think like some of those service industries where kids are genuinely interested, like if it's going to pique their interest, why not? why not have it? Right. So, but yeah, I think, for the most part, a lot of my kids are like financial literacy. It's something that they want to learn more about. And I wish, like I said, we can bring it, into the fold. And so I try to talk to some of my kids, not that I'm, this expert. And I tell them that, like, I'm not this expert in financial literacy, but at some point, you should probably start thinking about it. You should probably start talking about it. And that's what it is trying to bring it into just a normal just a normal conversation with them.
I think there's a lot of different classes we have to find a way to get in. I think for whatever reason, someone at the higher level above our pay grade are making these decisions that say, hey, these are the important skills I need to have. And yeah, I think there's too much that we could probably put into a class, into a school schedule, because, we're already so tight. And, like I said, we want to put more things in there. I think we're reflecting back to times when we were in school and there was automotive, they still have them. I think it just depends what school you go to. But I know going back to my high school, we had a whole full on garage, right? They were doing auto body and a little bit of, basic work on cars. And so there was people in those classes. I was never interested in that, it's definitely something that somebody was, right? Because there was kids in those classes. There was obviously, classes for the life management or whatever it was called, home ec. I think it was called home ec, where we got to cook and do different things like that and learn about life. And it's just too much, right? There's a lot of stuff that we had to find ways to get into the classroom. I definitely agree with you that financial literacy is one of them that I don't understand why we don't talk about it. Because even if when you go to college, I never even had those. I never had a class that even talked about that either. So I can go to, I went to 4 years of, well, I ended up taking 6 years of it, but I did 6 years of college, and I never had a class to teach me about any of these things that we're talking about right now. So it's definitely a disconnect there of real world skills that people should be aware of. Especially, we talked about off the air, being able to file your own taxes, being able to apply for a loan or whatever it may be, or things that you do need to have to get whatever you want, a house, a car, whatever it is that you need. There's a lot of disconnect there, you're able to go get a credit card at 18 years old, but you can't get a business loan, so there's a lot of little things that the world has set up, which is really weird. They allow you to, drive a vehicle that could be very dangerous at a very young age, but, you can't, have a glass of wine, so there's like little things where like some things, they just don't make sense. And that's just how it is. But I guess as educators, we got to find a way to, I don't know, integrate some of these real world things into the classroom. I know for Spanish, I do my best to teach them the value of learning Spanish, and especially being bilingual. And I highlight students that are already bilingual. They already speak Hindu, or they already speak Urdu or Punjabi or whatever it is they speak already at home, Russian, and just highlight that, like, hey, you're already bilingual, so why not add a third language to that? And so just different things, talking about culture, and I try to integrate those things in my classroom. With Spanish, I know you probably can do that with science every day, with whatever article pops up or whatever's going on in the world. You can definitely find a way to tie that in. And I think that's truly probably our job, right? Our job as a teacher is to take this complex thing and break it down to a sixth grader, like, hey, it's not just learning Spanish, but it's this, and this, and why it's important, so I know you're doing that in science as well.
Well, just going back to, trying to make things relevant. And I think that's what it is. It's trying to make things relevant to the students. And, on the part of the educator, sometimes it does take a little bit more work to think about, okay, how am I going to make this relevant, to these students? And, I've been guilty of this. My first couple of years, it wasn't about that. It was just about delivering content. How I wanted to deliver content, and, my ego getting in the way. No, this is how they need to learn it. And just gradually over time, I just, like I said, just started letting that go and being like, okay, well, how can I make it relevant to them? And, it led to me, getting closer to my students, because I had to talk to them to figure out what was relevant to them. And it doesn't mean that it's relevant to me, though. So, and I think that's the other part. Like, that's kind of the control part you got to let go of. Like, what's important to them and things that they're focused on, like, might not be what you're focused on, but like, how can I leverage that, to help deliver the content? So, me is just like, okay, I had to learn how to get, not that they use it anymore, but at first it was Facebook, because IG didn't exist back then. Right. So I was like,
MySpace.
Okay.
What do you mean MySpace, man?
Well, no, that was me. Like, I was into the MySpace thing. When I was out, they were like, MySpace, it's about Facebook. Like,
right.
My parents are on MySpace.
Right.
And now it's just like, they're like, Facebook. Like, old people on Facebook. They're
on Nextdoor. No, but they're definitely on Facebook. Yeah. Things change, but they get, these kids they'll surprise you with the things they're interested in, which is crazy because I was talking to you off the air is like technology. You helped me a lot with my technology help, my little IT help, and man, my sixth graders are killing it on the IT. Like, hey, I need to do this, this, and that, and they're really good at. For them, it's really cool. They know how to stream. They know how to set up a stream. They know how to, start a YouTube channel. Some of them have a podcast. So it's really cool to see all of that. And it's like, now can we like take that and somehow highlight that in the classroom? Because there's no reason like, oh no, we're not doing that here, right? We're gonna learn Spanish. It's like, no, why not have them, hey, let's do like a short segment on your, maybe you could do it in Espanol and I always joke with them, right? Because when they log into Zoom, everybody was just quiet. So I'm like, all right, welcome back to the podcast. And I'd have my mic set up and I have my little stream deck and I'm playing sound effects
Oh, I love the sound effects. Yeah.
right. And the kids are just like, wow, like you're like, they're like, oh, you're weird or whatever. And it's like, you guys aren't, no one's talking. So I guess it's a podcast. I'm literally talking and you're listening. So it was just a little thing like that, just a little, something I knew they were interested in and I just highlighted, so it was kind of cool doing that.
Yeah, no, but like again, just why not leverage what they know and what they're bringing to the table? I asked again, just asking them what works, what new technologies are out there, what are you looking at? And, through that, I learned about like OBS, which is what I'm using right now. And, we've talked about it offline about using OBS in the classroom, which is, I mean, it's just super cool. Like just being able to flip through like, like I'll do it right now, just being able to flip through like, different scenes
yeah.
real quick, it's like,
cool.
I told my students I'd light flex that for them.
And they're shocked when you show them cool things like, oh my god, what you have that, and they know they know.
Yeah, they know. Yeah, they know what they know what you're using,
yeah.
Or using things like Discord. Discord has helped us stay more connected. Like they'll chat on Discord all day long. Like they're just you tell them to drop, just have a meme dump, and then just 20 kids will just start dropping different gifs and memes in there. And it's like, why not leverage, like I said, the things that they know into your classroom, integrate it. At the same time, you bring something to the table. So at the end of the day, they're contributing to the class, you're contributing to the class. And that's when you get the sense of like, this is our classroom. Like this belongs to us. It's not mine. It's not mine alone to hold. It's like, it's our space where we kind of learn from each other. And like I said, it's become a real powerful tool. Like I said, I've gotten more into Instagram because of them. Like we have our own personal, like Instagram page. I'll do Instagram lives with them and things like that. And some people are like, well, isn't that too much work? It's like, it is a lot of work, but the payoff, you got to understand that the payoff is enormous because they're more connected to the classroom. They're more connected with me, asking them to do things like, try this. Okay, they're more apt to try it. And I talk to them all the time. Like, I want them to suggest things to me so that I can try it for the first time, because it puts me back into that student mode, learning something brand new for the first time and understanding how hard something is. Like if you have no foundation whatsoever, how hard it is to learn something. And when they're the experts and you're not, they can also see like how frustrating it is sometimes to be a teacher, because you just want to tell them like, no, it's this simple, but like it's not. When you're teaching someone who doesn't have a reference, it's not as simple as you think it is. So you like, it's been good for all of us to to engage in that way.
Well, I'm glad that you found that time to do that and that energy, so you could your students, like you said, it pays off because your students find that common ground with you. Like, okay, he's a real human being. He's not just my teacher. And you're just finding things that they're interested in, like whether it be whatever sports, you connect with them, or technology. I love showing off like little tech things, like you said, that they're into, and mentioning whatever they're doing, because I think that's something that we have to do as educators, and not just deliver content. We have to get away from just here's the book and this is what you're going to learn. It's like it's not going to be useful to them, and that's why when I do teach them vocabulary, I do let them choose. Like, for instance, just a quick thing is like, all right, we're going to learn about transportation. I let them choose 5 of their favorite ones, and they learn those. Like there's a list of 50, but maybe a boat's not important to them, or a horse is not important to them. So you choose the 5 that you see, and they want to pick cars or whatever it may be, bikes. And then I know, like, what? I think they're going to probably remember that forever, because if they like scooters, they'll remember how to say scooter, So things like that. So I like try to find a way to be on the same level as them. And like you said, kind of show yourself that you're vulnerable as well. Like, hey, hey, how do you, I need a gaming PC, man. What do I do? So little things like, hey, I need this, or like, I need a microphone. What do you recommend? And I don't know, kind of having that conversation with them
Yeah.
is pretty
Well, for
cool.
me, I think it's cool because, every day, and I've said this, to the people around me, they're probably sick of hearing me say it, but, I always talk about how every day I invite my students into my classroom or into our classroom to learn about something abstract they have no knowledge of.
Hmm.
Like, and I'm asking you to try it, to just take that leap of faith and try this and believe that you'll be able to understand it.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't I be willing to do the same thing? Like, why would I not be willing to say, okay, well, you bring something that's new to me that I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to trust you that you're telling me I can do this,
Right.
and I'll be able to learn it if you teach it to me and you show me the ropes. So, and I think that, like, that vulnerability makes you more human to them, because they do see, like, okay, he's willing to try something outside of his comfort zone,
Yep.
outside of his wheelhouse.
Exactly.
Um, and I think it's easier for me to ask them to do the same when I do that.
You hit it on the head, Jaime. So yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on here. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I appreciate you sharing your story, and I hope we could reconnect soon and stay connected, so we could, I don't know, keep doing whatever we're doing with technology and being educators. So yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I really do.
No, thank you for having me on. Like I said, it's been a blast. I've been actually looking, over the last couple of months to connecting with other, Latinx teachers out there, uh, just because I've worked with some phenomenal, like, Black educators over the summer, and seeing how close knit their community is becoming on social media. And I was like, okay, well, I need to do a better job of, like, for our own community of
Yes.
of getting out there and connecting, with some of us. And so I was glad I ran across you and a couple of others I'm starting to connect with. And so I
Yeah.
definitely look forward to building this community
Yeah,
over
man.
time.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it, man. We're here, and yeah, I appreciate your time. Oh, can you let the people know where they can find you, man?
Oh yeah, so everything is at Avila Teach. So on IG, YouTube, Twitter, all the same handle.
Okay. I appreciate you, Jaime. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, you too, Alex. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.